Let's talk about troubleshooting and the egg donation contract. I think typically the biggest issue we encounter is just people dragging their feet and not wanting to get the contract done. There is a deadline. It typically has to be signed before the donor starts with stimulating medications. So tell us a little bit about why that's important for the contract to be signed in time.
The donor, it will be on a schedule issued by the clinic once she passes her screening. There are certain clinics that will not issue a schedule until we provide what's called legal clearance, meaning a contract has been signed and the lawyer indicates that that has occurred already. But what we have found, and it's sort of a phenomenon that is unique to this world and this industry, is that signing a contract makes things crystal clear and real when it's more of a vague concept that you're going along the road towards working with an egg donor. But you can actually sign a contract. A lot of people think, okay, now this is really happening. This woman who I don't know is donating eggs to me. And so there are recipients who, because of an inability or an unwillingness to grasp the reality of the situation, they do delay, and donors can get frustrated. Donors delay too, but it's more often when there is a delay that it's coming on the recipient side.
Okay.
The funds related to the donor's compensation are put in trust before the contract is shown to her, because the contract itself will indicate that the recipient family has provided the funds necessary for your egg donor cycle. What we try to avoid is a situation where we leave that out and the recipients are able to somehow have leverage over the donor and basically saying, if you sign, we'll put up the money. Now, the money's in trust. It's never used if there's never a donation at all. But it is a good faith way of showing to the donor, yeah, we have the resources, we put it aside, we're doing this in good faith, and not saying we want you to sign up first before we'll go get the money.
Right.
So we avoid that kind of, it's an uneven bargaining position also. Egg donors are women in their 20s, and in all likelihood, they have not been dealing with too many contracts in their lives, and certainly not contracts involving something so important that they're doing with their own bodies. Recipients tend to be, in a generalization, more sophisticated. They are professionals many times. They've been working in the world of contracts and agreements for longer. So it's important for both sides to have legal representation for many reasons, but especially because the donor has a right to have her own lawyer explain things to her that she may not understand in a way that the recipients already do understand.
Okay. And again, no matter how hesitant you are to draft or sign the contract, the recipients nor the donor can be forced legally to go through with it. So it may psychologically be a huge milestone, but again, it doesn't force anyone to do anything in the end. Is that right?
That's right. It is a contract that is more of an expression of intent and is more of a memorialization of terms and an understanding of wishes for the future, rather than some sort of ironclad agreement that forces you to do something and you can never get out of it. And it's important. We don't want to stress the getting out of it part too much, because we also don't want to introduce to donors this idea that, at any point, if you decide you don't want to, you don't want to. There's a moral commitment, and the intended parents are relying on this commitment significantly, financially and emotionally. So we don't want to, it is true that nobody is forced to go through with it, but we also make sure that donors understand that someone's relying on your wherewithal, what you're saying, what you're doing, so much that, it's good to follow through on your word.
Right. By the time they get to the contract, the recipients have invested tens of thousands of dollars in this process.
And
going on
their emotions and belief in this woman's purposefulness.
And people who are trying to have babies through IVF are extremely vulnerable emotionally.
Yeah. This is not a first resort for many people. Okay. Gay men, because they don't have infertility issues. But for most people, no. It's something that is available to them. It gives them a chance to have some genetic contribution to their child. through a husband or partner. It gives them a chance to be pregnant themselves. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to do, which we don't have in so much of the world, but we do have here. But it's also a serious matter. And for many people, the contract phase reinforces the seriousness of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a natural hesitation that occurs. And the lawyers that work in this field understand that. They see it all the time. So we work with lawyers that are very experienced, that know the ins and outs of this, that have seen all sorts of contingencies. Litigation is not a big issue here. A lot of people are fearful of that. We haven't been involved in basically there's been
none. And let me ask you this: has there ever been stalemates or almost non-existent?
Stalemates, yes, but that hasn't risen to the level of litigation. We have had situations, very few, maybe one or two, you remember over the years, where a donor had some particular demand that she provided at the last minute that's just untenable and unacceptable. But that is very, very exceptionally rare. In the literature, really, when there have been lawsuits, and there have been very few, it's usually a donor that didn't get paid by some program, or a donor who had some complications, and it turned out that there was no insurance to protect her medical bills and pay for her medical bills. Usually recipients don't sue donors, because you really can only sue your donor unless she defrauded you or there's some willful deception, which is very hard to prove. And most donors don't do that anyway. So you can't sue your donor for not doing it. And a recipient and a donor can only really sue her intended parents if she didn't get what was agreed to in the contract, which is her money or some insurance or medical cost protection if she needs any type of medical care.
And so I'm just going to ask you to wrap up the advice you give to recipients and donors from a legal standpoint who are undergoing this.
Don't overthink. It's a big deal, but it's also, that doesn't mean it's a big deal legally. Just because it's a big deal emotionally and in your life doesn't mean that it translates into a major contract. An egg donor contract can be covered in 20 pages and covered well. There are some lawyers that put everything under the sun in there, and their contracts are 45 pages, and it's a daunting and intimidating exercise, which doesn't have to be that way. Many lawyers do it just to, sort of look impressive. But all the basic provisions that you mentioned earlier, Kathy, are what belong in a properly drafted egg donor agreement. Now, as a lawyer, my view is that it's a conflict of interest to represent somebody who's also in our program, which is why we recommend lawyers to do the contract part. That's not something that we get paid for. We don't provide legal services. I work as a private lawyer for people who are not in my program. So you need a lawyer in your state or in the state of the clinic. There has to be some nexus with one of the states involved in order to be able to draft the contract legally. You can't just pick a lawyer in any state and have them do a contract if they're not admitted in any of the locations that are involved with the egg donor agreement and the egg donation arrangement.
Okay. So get a good lawyer and don't overthink it. Right? Get a lawyer experienced in these contracts.
I would say, and add a third thing, work expeditiously, not sloppily, carefully, yes, but without delay, because delay can only bring disruption. It doesn't make things better to slow it down.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much, Sanford. I think we learned a lot about the egg donor contract, and I think this will help a lot of people out there considering doing this. So thanks again.
Good to be with you.